Coming onto the stage now is Collin Davis, the GM for Alexa for Business, and he's also joined by Keith Bazard, who is the VP of End User and Public Cloud at Johnson & Johnson, to discuss Alexa for Business. So please put your hands together and welcome as they come.
Thank you. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Happy lunch hour. I'm Collin Davis, and I'm the general manager of Alexa for Business. It's great to see a conference dedicated to voice and the voice topic, and see all the things that start to build around these things that we're building that use our voice. And I'm super excited to bring Keith with me from Johnson & Johnson. He heads up the end user IT group at J&J and has been a really early customer and early feedback provider for us with using Alexa and using voice in the workplace. You know, Keith, you and I have talked about our kids a lot, and Nate told the story about the little girl trying to touch a newspaper. I like to talk about Alexa and start talks with talking about kids and how they interact. I have a 5-year-old, and my 5-year-old actually, speaking of expecting to be able to talk to devices, we were in the car the other day, and he said, "Daddy, how does the radio work?" And we were playing the FM radio. And I pondered the question, and I tried to explain to him FM broadcasting and the notion of a radio DJ, which he quickly interrupted me. This was not the question that he had in his mind. He said, "Daddy, what's the radio's name?" And I said, "It doesn't have a name. Why?" And he said, "Because I want to tell it to play something else." And the point is that for kids already today, that is the world that they live in. They live in a world where they expect to be able to talk to machines and technology, and they expect to be able to get the things that they want. And he has grown up with voice and with Alexa in the house, and he's so accustomed to it. Keith, what's your favorite story with kids using Alexa or voice?
So, like many of us, we've been leveraging this technology for the last few years. And early on, we used it for shopping lists, right? So every weekend, I'd go to the store, and I'd be looking up on the Alexa app, okay, what's on my shopping list? My kids figured out really quickly, though, and I have 3 of them, that if Dad sees it on the list, I'm going to buy it. And so the one day I came back, and it was everything from Oreos to chocolate chip cookies to candy to Swedish fish. And my wife asked me, "So why did you buy all this stuff?" I was like, "Well, it was on the list from Alexa. I thought you put it on." So the voice authentication piece is a big one for us, as you might expect from a shopping list for when I go to the food store.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's funny how quickly they learn, and you know, setting timeout timers, all sorts of things. But the takeaway point here for me is voice is really here. We've been using it at home. It's part of our kids' lives. It's part of our daily lives. It's been in living rooms. You're seeing it in cars. You're seeing it in various rooms throughout the house. And we set out to take it to the workplace and to the office. And that was really the charter of Alexa for Business. And it actually started in a meeting room. Lots of you did not raise your hand when you said, when asked if you had problems starting a conference call. I find that very hard to believe. I know how hard it is to start conference calls, and many of our customers have been super excited with the notion of starting a meeting using Alexa. We were actually in a meeting room, and this is sort of the genesis of Alexa for Business, when somebody was trying to dial into a conference. And they reached into their pocket and they pulled out their phone and they unlocked it and they launched their calendar and they found the meeting that they were supposed to be in, and they scrolled through the email and they found the dial-in and PIN, and then started to transpose the meeting room information or the dial-in information from the phone to the touchpad in the room. And they fat-fingered it a couple times. And eventually, the conferencing system hung up on them. It said, "Thank you, goodbye." And it hung up because they got the PIN wrong too many times. And somebody in the room joked. Somebody said, "Alexa, start the meeting." And we laughed. It was funny, but we quickly realized this was actually a really cool idea and something we should build. And so we did. We built the connections between Alexa and the meeting room equipment and conferencing systems that many of us all use today, and allowed for you to walk into a room and say, "Alexa, start the meeting," and Alexa's connected to the calendar, and it's connected to the in-room hardware, and it's able to automatically figure out what meeting that room is supposed to be joining right now and start that meeting right away. And it saves a ton of headache and a ton of time with respect to starting meetings. We use it in over 700 conference rooms at Amazon now, and we're deploying broadly across the company to all our conference rooms, and we've learned a ton of cool things. And And that was sort of the next thing that we learned is once we got it into conference rooms, we realized it's one thing for all of us to have an Alexa or 2 or 3 in our homes and use the mobile app to configure them. It's an entirely different matter for an enterprise organization like Keith and his team to be able to deploy and use Alexa across thousands of locations within an organization. And that's where AWS and Alexa for Business came in, where we've built an expertise in helping customers manage workloads in the cloud. And really, Alexa's another workload in the cloud. And we built an AWS console-based system that allows for enterprises to be able to configure room profiles and set up different common patterns across their organization so that they can manage devices at scale and be able to affect the changes that they want to across large numbers of devices in a way that is much more set up for their real world use cases and how they differ from the way you might want to use it at home. And we think about it in really 2 ways. The first way is shared or communal areas, like a conference room, where people are going in and out and being able to start conference rooms, or in a kitchen and be able to interact with Alexa to find a meeting room, for example, nearby for that impromptu meeting and you need a space to talk. And the other way is personal devices or end user productivity, where all of us have Alexas at home and we all have jobs, and many times we're at home, and the way we get things done is through small micro tasks or micro transactions, where we pull out our phone and we send a quick note to somebody, or we write down a reminder so we don't forget things. And these are the types of things that Alexa can help us with at home. And what we allow for is enterprises to enroll their employees' Alexa accounts into their organization so that their personal Alexa accounts have access to things at work, and they can start to blur the line just like they do with their mobile phone. And as they move throughout their day, starting from waking up in the morning, Alexa, what's my flash briefing, and it's reading the news, it can provide them with not only public news from their favorite media outlets, but also potentially internal news coming from an internal comms team that's being published, or checking on your calendar and moving meetings and so on and so forth. And when you get to your office, there's another Alexa device in your office that you can kind of continue those interactions with. We've seen tons of great traction and lots of interest and exciting use cases, things we never even imagined. And that's why we're super happy to have Keith on stage. And Keith, I'd like to hear about the first time you heard about Alexa and Alexa for Business and what excites you most.
Well, I think it was the day that you announced at re:Invent is our first meeting. So I had the distinct pleasure to work with Amazon on many of the emerging technologies. It's been a great partner for us. Some of the interesting scenarios to think about as you look to build solutions from an enterprise space is, how do you enable the common scenarios you talked about? So think of corporate communications. Right now, only about 60% of our emails within J&J are ever read, right? So how do you have a more effective way that provides communication at the broad enterprise level, but then how do you personalize it down? So how do you take something that in essence is stateless and build a model and a mechanism to enable different use cases associated with communication, but more automation, training, and actions as well. With a company our size, 150,000 people around the world, it's hard in the fact that we want to make it easier for people to adopt technology. So meetings is a perfect one. How do you reduce the 10-minute wasted every single meeting? But then how do you then make the meetings more productive? Being able to manage the action items, the follow-ups, the note-taking, all the different scenarios and so forth that we do that many of us don't do it well, right? If you look at how many meetings are actually set up well with an agenda, follow-up from an action items to then actually resulting in a change, they're rare. And so how do we make it easier for those actions to happen? But then you look for some a little bit more interesting scenarios for us. We have a large sales force, so sales training is a great way for us to be able to provide regular interactions on key messages. What should I be telling this physician or this surgeon today based off of my sales plan? What are the different ways that we could actually also use this with our scientists, people who are actually using their hands, doing the research every day, and leverage voice as a way versus them needing to actually put down what they're doing and be able to actually take away from their focus, right? And so the voice is just a new frontier for us, and we just started to actually break through with a number of different ideas and thoughts on how we can actually make the experience really specific to the different scenarios across manufacturing, distribution, research, sales, finance, business intelligence. and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, the potential is so broad, and there's so many possible different use cases. Kind of stepping back for a second, though, how do you and your organization at J&J think about new things? And voice has been very prevalent in homes, and people are using it every single day, but in the business space, it's relatively new. And how does your IT organization think about the cloud and think about adoption of new technologies?
Yeah, it's a balance, as you might expect, for any large company such as ourselves. How do you drive innovation, but do it in a way with the controls from security and compliance that makes sense? And that's where I think the difference between Alexa versus Alexa for Business really comes in, where I can manage what devices are connected where. I can develop a way to be able to have them connect into our Wi-Fi and security setting theirs. I can manage what skills are actually applied to what devices. So having the ability for me to have that lightweight management, but still enable innovation at the pace we want, is the balance that Alexa for Business provides above and beyond what we've been talking about today, which is more the consumer focus from Alexa.
And that was really a big part for all the customers we talked to, was providing controls and insights and being able to set policies and rules, and we allow for IT to be able to restrict specific skills so that only certain skills can be used on a given device, and so on and so forth. But where do you start? I mean, you in the beginning, when you heard about Alexa for Business, you listed a dozen different really cool ideas, and I think you guys started in part in the conference room. But can you tell us a little bit about what you've done so far and where you've started?
Yeah, the conference room is an easy one for any large company. Not only the size, the scale, and we talk about starting things quickly, but for us, we have 800 sites around the globe. And I could probably tell you almost every single one of them is unique. So if you look at the conference room technology, it's all based off of when that refresh or that building was done. So it's not consistent. So something I might do in one setting is very different than another. This allows us to be able to connect multiple technologies together to reduce what it takes for people to be able to go between offices. So that was an easy one for us. And once it was there, it's really just building out a mechanism. And the partnership was the hackathon we did a couple months together.
Yeah, the hackathon was super cool. Before we go there, the way you describe conference rooms, it's super consistent with the customers that we've talked to, and as you build out new conference rooms and you buy new hardware and you outfit them, you don't go replace all the old hardware. And we spent a lot of time.
We would love to, but that's not financially possible.
I'm sure your finance officer would not want you to. Yeah, we spent a lot of time building in the connections to all the different providers so that you wouldn't have to. And what we found was really interesting is when you walk into a meeting room, even within the same building, it's not uncommon to walk into a meeting room and find a setup made by one manufacturer in one room and a setup made by another one in the room next door. And the ways in which you start that meeting are subtly different. And they're subtly different enough that a worker within your organization might have to call and ask for help to get a meeting started in one room because it's one that they're not familiar with. And what we aimed to do was provide a universal way to control those, which is our voice. So Alexa Start the Meeting doesn't care what type of system you have in that room. And we spent a lot of time really thinking about that. It created, and I think you guys are starting to learn some of this too, Keith. We at Amazon noticed that when you put an Echo in a conference room, you have to help people how to use it. It's now in a new space. And so there's the change management process of helping people know what they can do with this device. And what we did was we put a chat bubble on the screen or on the monitor in the conference room that just says the words, Alexa, start the meeting. And it's inherently viral when you do that. People tend to say, Alexa, start the meeting in front of a colleague because it's a naturally communal space. And that colleague thinks that's pretty cool, and so they try it in the next room. And what we saw at Amazon in the buildings where we have Alexa deployed is within a couple weeks, we went from basically 0 to 70% utilization, where 70% of meetings are started with Alexa versus using the touch panel. And it's just through a very simple graphic mechanism that helps people understand how to use it and benefits from the fact that these environments are inherently communal and viral. And I think we're working with you to do the same thing on your screens.
Yeah, change management is difficult with respect to that. One, just because of the types of users interacting for any large company. So yes, that is something to not underestimate as you look to go ahead.
But let's talk about that hackathon. I mean, I think we've always viewed the conference room as a great starting point because it's a very tangible, painful problem for a lot of customers. But it is a starting point, and part of Alexa's magic is the ability to extend it with skills, and there's over 40,000 skills in the skills store, and we enable customers to build private skills to connect to your internal systems. Tell us about what it is we did and how that hackathon worked.
Yeah, through the partnership between J&J and Amazon, we built out just a great event. And it was about 150 employees within J&J that we sponsored in one of our offices. We took over actually the whole cafeteria for the day. And from 8 a.m. to about 9 p.m., we went through about 10 hours where people were able to develop an idea through teams of 5 to 6 people, and then implement some form of it. And we had 15 teams. And across those teams and so forth, we got some great ideas, great scenarios on what are the different ways that we haven't thought of how you could leverage your voice and Alexa to be able to make a difference from a J&J. You had a couple themes, as you I can imagine, across those different groups. One of it was around business intelligence, be able to really provide access to the data that in many cases lives within Amazon already, and be able to extend our Amazon data stores into voice as a mechanism. Another one was on help desk. And so for us, I run our help desk internally within J&J. And so how can I make it easy for people to create a ticket, get an answer to a question that doesn't even require an agent or someone on the other end to actually be able to respond? How can I check the status of an update, escalate it, add notes, add comments? These common scenarios that most enterprises have were there, and it was really interesting to see how people were adopting that. And another interesting was around sales training. I mentioned before of how being able to provide the daily planning for someone who's about to go out and visit multiple physicians or multiple hospitals, and what we should be saying, what is the sequence of those activities. So merging your calendar with map technology to understand the sequence of events, and then be able to provide real-time visibility on what should I be saying with respect to those particular messages associated with those accounts and contacts and so forth that you're going to be seeing. And then the last is around distribution. We have a large manufacturing distribution center, so how do we be able to leverage everything from events to alerts to the output people are seeing in real time based off of streaming data? So a lot of really interesting scenarios, even beyond what I thought, and that was the fun aspect of it, by enabling that foundation and platform, really driving people to think through their imagination. And what's possible today is amazing for each of us in the both consumer, but also more importantly on the enterprise level.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I mean, we sort of started with Alexa for Business thinking about the common problems that nearly all professionals face, meetings and calendars and schedules, but all of us have our unique tools and tasks that we do throughout the day, depending on our job, and letting the community build skills to be able to do that it's really neat. Who are the top 1 or 2 in that hackathon?
Yeah, there's a few. The help desk one was one that actually won, the core prize. Anything I could do to make people's lives better and reduce tickets and be able to have a better experience, it's something I'm always focused on. And what was interesting for them is not only were they able to do those common tasks, from a ticket perspective, but also be able to provide innovative ways to be able to leverage, SNS and notifications back for people. So beyond just the transactional, how can you pull in then, through Lambda calls and other Amazon services, different ways to even expand the experience beyond the traditional Alexa type voice. And that's where I thought the real strength of that particular team did with respect to that day.
Yeah, that's really cool. And for those that don't know, SNS is a notification service in AWS that lets you send text messages or emails or other forms. It sort of it ties back to the previous conversation where we were talking about multimodal experiences where interacting via voice can trigger off other things like sending messages, and it's really powerful. The help desk use case is actually a use case that is, I would say it's probably the most popular second thing that customers do after conference rooms. And again, they almost start in the conference room. So teams like yours I'm sure, spend a lot of time going from conference room to make sure that the systems are still working, or responding to tickets where someone had said that someone unplugged the HDMI cord, or something got disconnected. And at Amazon, we have these posters on the wall that say, for issues in this room, call this phone number or send an email to AV Help Desk. And I don't know, do people use that very often?
Yes, so the analogy I always like to give for help desk is it's like an iceberg in the ocean. All the tickets are what you see above the waterline, but the real perception of the IT organization is everything below the water. So if we're able to provide a better experience for people through an easier way for us to get feedback, that's our focus. So automation, predictive analytics, AI, data, and now different channel mechanisms for us to be able to get that feedback, that's our core, that's our model, because very few people, you have to do something really bad for someone to create a ticket. People don't want to spend the time on it. But if I could lower that bar to get that feedback, to be able to improve it, it just drives a better perception with respect to an enterprise IT function.
Yeah, and that's, we've all been there. We walk into that conference room and the meeting's not started, and we'll quickly use our cell phone or walk to the meeting room next door just to get the meeting done, because that's what we need to do much more quickly than we will let you and your team know that there's an issue that needs to be fixed. And we were excited about seeing connections to things like ServiceNow or Zendesk that allow, using their APIs, customers have built skills that allow for you to say, Alexa, tell IT this room needs attention, as simple as that. And that ticket gets cut, and someone knows to go deal with it. So just trying to lower that bar to help customers like you raise that iceberg, so to speak, and see more above the waterline.
And what's great about it with the Alexa for Business, since we know what device is in what location, you're not asking people, hey, what room am I in or what location? You can actually pull that based off of the data that you're managing with respect to the controls.
Yeah, that was one of the APIs we added early, was Resolve Room, and that API is part of Alexa for Business. Any device that's registered that way, the skill developers can use the Resolve Room API to determine information about the room it's in, and that's really important. That's really important for Alexa start the meeting. It needs to start the meeting in the right room, not the room next door, or tell IT this room needs attention. Have you guys played with the address books at all? It's a relatively new feature we added for allowing curated address books, so you can say call help desk, for example, in a conference room. I think that was one of your early ideas.
It definitely was one of our asks. And so for us, 800 sites around the world, how you call everything from the security room to the cafeteria to see what's on the menu for that day, to the help desk, even numbers, is country specific. So having an address book that you're able to configure, manage, and then even extend based off different locations was key to us.
Yeah, I think a lot of customers are using it for calling the front desk or calling help desk, and it's configurable, and it lets admins also control who can receive calls from those rooms, and so those rooms can call internal numbers only, for example. The cafeteria you mentioned, I think that was like the runner-up, or it was in the list?
That was on the list. I don't think it was runner-up. I think it was a little down on the list. As much as we all need to go to the cafeteria every day, that's probably not the most value from a business perspective.
Yeah, I remember, just general Q&A, though, in that theme was a really common one, though. So Alexa, what's the guest Wi-Fi password, for example, is a really popular one that fixes a pain point. And then there is, of course, what's on the menu downstairs at the cafeteria, too. Anything else you'd like to touch on? We've got about a minute left here.
The thing I like to focus whenever I talk about cloud, and I think Alexa is a great example of it, the cost to innovate is so low. If you look at the capabilities and what's now at your fingertips, from the APIs, the capabilities, the technology, I just ask, all my peers across the industry just to start, lean into the model, figure out different ways to be able to provide these innovative skills. And once you have that, the flywheel effect really starts to happen. We all have challenging jobs with respect to supporting and driving innovation across, our users and companies. But the thing I would ask is just start, independent of level, independent of group, just really build out a mechanism to do it. And there's a lot of great tutorials, and I'm sure help from the Alexa team to be able to help support you on that journey itself.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And we certainly appreciate your championing this and leaning into it. It's been great to partner with you and get good feedback. And one thing I will say in common across all of our early customers is a business leader like yourself who sees where this is going and really wants to be part of it and knows that it will ultimately make their workforce more productive, get things done more easily, and getting out ahead of it is critical for that competitive advantage. And you're right, it's not super hard to build a skill. Your bunch of teams built a skill at a hackathon in a period of a day, and it's pretty cool what you can do in a day.
Agreed.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. We're at time, and I think many of you are hungry, so thank you.